Premiers reach unprecedented Canadian free trade deal in Whitehorse. Prolonged negotiations between Canadian provincial and territorial leaders in Whitehorse have resulted in a new deal on interprovincial trade. But while the deal is meant to cover most goods and services, it's unclear how significant the Canadian Free Trade Agreement (CFTA) is until more information is released. The agreement in principle reached by the 13 premiers this week at the annual Summer Council of the Federation talks replaces the 23-year-old Agreement on Internal Trade. The old agreement covered only specific sectors of the economy, said Yukon Premier Darrell Pasloski at the closing news conference, speaking as the chair and spokesperson for the group this year. The new agreement virtually covers the entire Canadian economy and will have unprecedented transparency on how the federal government, the provinces and the territories will regulate. Pasloski said the regulatory burdens on Canadian businesses would decrease. Inconsistencies between jurisdictions creates unnecessary differences that really are barriers to trade, and it raises the operating costs and ultimately the cost to consumers, he said. Pasloski said the deal establishes a process for standardizing things like transportation safety regulations for the shipping industry, or even the size of Canadian milk cartons. This is a wonderful day. We're very excited about it, he said, thanking his colleagues for their work making the announcement possible. Pasloski identified the new internal trade agreement as a priority for Yukon's term as chair of the group. Negative list of exemptions not released in a news release. Economic Development Minister Navdeep Bains called the agreement in principle unprecedented. For the first time in a generation, Canada has a new and modern framework for trade within our borders, the federal minister said. Canadians will benefit from increased opportunity and choice. While the agreement in principle was called groundbreaking, it wasn't immediately clear how much would change or how fast. The group took a negative list approach to negotiating the deal, meaning everything would be deregulated or harmonized across provinces except for an identified list of sensitive items. If that list is long, the deal has less impact than if that list is short. Officials said the list would be posted in the coming days. This is a great starting point, Pasloski said. And as we move forward, we will be working towards how we can slowly eliminate over time the exemptions that do exist on those lists. In response to a question from a local reporter, the Yukon Premier disclosed that his territory had put items on the list to protect but did not specify what those items were. The number of exemptions that exist in this new agreement are substantially lower, he said. What I think is important to recognize is that the federal government has by far the most exemptions. Procurement dispute. The deal expands access to municipal and provincial government procurement for goods and services. With infrastructure funds rolling out across Canada amid challenging economic circumstances for some regions, this area proved one of the most contentious to negotiate. Sources tell CBC News that Alberta sought assurances that it could give preference in awarding contracts to Albertan businesses and individuals. with its economy slumping and unemployment up thanks to a downturn in the oil and gas sector, Premier Rachel Notley sought a way to make sure the government spending stayed inside her province. The compromise was reached. The members of the free trade area that already exists between Western Canadian provinces, the new West Partnership B.C., Alberta and Saskatchewan, and possibly Manitoba in the future, were exempted from Alberta's preferential tendering. The 4 Atlantic provinces could also be exempted, taking into account their challenging economic circumstances. But if an Ontario or Quebec company is competing for a contract in Alberta, this deal allows Notley's government to favour a local bid. It's unclear how this unequal footing is consistent with the municipal procurement deal the provinces helped negotiate and signed off on in the Canada-European Union trade negotiations. That deal's provisions for opening up municipal procurement were billed as very significant. One Alberta official suggested that the arrangements Notley negotiated in Whitehorse mania to sunset before the Canada-EU trade deal comes into force. The Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement between Canada and Europe, or CFTA, could be signed this fall and ratified over the next year. Alcohol not covered. Provincial and territorial trade ministers have been directed to work through some technical issues that remain. Internal trade headaches have been a political issue for years, with a Senate committee reporting last month that red tape and restrictions cost the Canadian economy billions. In a news release, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business congratulated the premiers but identified 4 areas most urgently in need of attention. The working group has been established to explore ways to improve trade in alcoholic beverages, something this deal doesn't cover.